Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order our work session for the Borough of Gettysburg for Monday, November 25th, 2024. Thanks all for coming out tonight. The only opening remarks we have tonight are the announcement, the open call to children of all ages. Friday, December 6th through Sunday, December 8th is is it the third annual Gettysburg Christmas Festival. Activities in and about the entire borough of Gettysburg. Please start planning now. Fun for everyone. The other announcement is that the 2025 budget proposal has been posted on the website for public review. And will be, I believe we also have a hard copy in the lobby for those who do not wish to view it online. Is Rob not coming?
No, and Mackenzie had an emergency, so
Right.
she's not joining us tonight.
All right, we had intended to have a special presentation from Mackenzie Johnson, who is our co-responder, who works in conjunction with our police department. She is an adjunct of the York Adams MHIDD. We are just about closing the first 2 years of our program. This is a really important initiative that was started in conjunction with MHIDD and WellSpan. The idea is that not everybody who is having a terrible, terrible day needs to end up in the criminal justice system. Sometimes they need somebody who can intervene and help them find a variety of services. In the last 2 years, Ms. Johnson has worked very closely with the Gettysburg Police Department as well as several other police departments in Adams County. She's been covering this entire county by herself and intervening to help people divert into care instead of the criminal justice system. There's been some trepidation as to whether the funding for this program was going to be renewed, and we have it on pretty good authority, though I don't think it's been inked yet, that Mackenzie's position is safe, at least into 2025, and we're hoping to see funding continue from MHIDD into the future. She was going to give us a special presentation this evening on this. There's a variety of things she does for our department. There's also a number of projects that she and our police department are working on to further refine the way we approach neurodiversity as well as mental illness in our community. I'm hoping she'll be able to make this presentation at a later date. I think that's really important information for all of us. And should there ever come a day when the state apparatus are not able to fund this position, I hope that whoever's on council at that time will take a serious hard look at funding it internally if we must. All right. That's going to take us to our first public comment section of the evening. We ask that you restrict your comment to items appearing on tonight's agenda. We ask that you use the podium. Please limit yourself to 5 minutes, and we need you to state your name and address of residence, please.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Goodmistad. I live at 307 Baltimore Street. And I may be a little late on this, I'm not really sure, but with the upcoming Christmas festival and all the things that the borough does to close off the streets and thing, I think it's wonderful. But the following weekend is the Tuba Fest, and in the years past, they haven't always closed off the parking spaces in front of the hotel for the Tuba Fest, and I really sincerely request that you do. We get 400 or 500 people there. It's a crazy, fun evening. It's not for very long. And since we close off the meters during the week for Garma, I'm hoping that you would consider closing them off just for that hour or so in front of the hotel. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I believe there is a plan to use vehicles to block off those spaces this year. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening. I'm Bill Mooney, 151 West High Street. I have a couple thoughts about the sidewalk cluttered A-frame signs issue. As someone that walks the streets often, I like to see the A-frame signs. It's a good way to get a lot of information about specific businesses, what's on special, what's on sale, what bands might be playing, what events might be going on, things like that. Also, I think that there are some stores that tend to have clutter, right? But so maybe there can be an ordinance of how many square feet you're allowed to take up on sidewalk before it's considered too much. Also, like the signs that say like XYZ Contracting just did a job here, and they put them either where the public tree is or in the public area, or a political sign. Those should be limited as well. But I think I'm in favor of the A-frame signs personally. I think all businesses should be encouraged to have them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about, pardon me, some of the issues surrounding sidewalk ordinance revisions. This is a pretty big project we had decided to undertake this year, and we've only been able to make really some slight dents in it. We didn't get too far into the process before we realized that in spite of all of our best intentions, what we don't know about the condition of our sidewalks is going to turn into some real dollars pretty quickly. The three things we wanted to try to tackle tonight have to do with where sidewalks intersect with other aspects of life in the borough. Right? The sidewalks exist unique to themselves, but they also intersect with so many other aspects of our shared community life here. So we want to talk about the intersection between the shade tree ordinance, sidewalk clutter, and outdoor dining. So pretty early into the process, we all fairly unanimously, I believe, said that the borough should take responsibility for sidewalk heaves and buckles that were caused by shade trees. You know, we compel property owners to install these shade trees, and then we have traditionally sort of washed our hands of whatever damage those trees did. And then as we start to talk about creating more robust mechanisms for enforcement of provisions of the sidewalk ordinances to make sure that property owners are taking responsibility for the public rights of way that use their properties, we started to kind of question the fairness of whether imposing a tree upon somebody against their will sometimes, then causing damage, and then billing them for the damage was fair, equitable, ethical, et cetera. So the general consensus was that the borough should take responsibility for sections of the sidewalk that have been damaged by borough-planted trees. Some of the trees that are damaging sidewalks probably predate our our shade tree ordinance. They may have been placed by the borough. They may have been placed by private property owners. There's really no way of knowing who planted a 70-year-old tree that could be doing some real damage. So in order to make a better assessment of what our intentions are going to materialize as, you know, we can say all we want, let's just go ahead and replace all that sidewalk. But it quickly starts to add up to numbers that are untenable. Realizing that we didn't know what we didn't know, we asked our friends at the Shade Tree Commission to, over the summer, do an inventory of all the trees. And I believe that is largely complete, and they're here to talk to us tonight about that finding. If you wouldn't mind taking the podium.
I'd be happy to do so.
And thank you for this opportunity to update the council on what the Shade Tree Commission has been doing. Just as a reminder, I'm David Rice. I live at 145 West Broadway. And I've been on the Shade Tree Commission since, I think, 2018. Susan Noggle is also here this evening. She's another member. Martin Jolin is our third member, and Rebecca Brown is the alternate on the Shade Tree Commission. So the last survey of the trees, census, so to speak, was done in 2009. And so the council, the Shade Tree Commission, Borough, all felt that it was time to update that. Fortunately, sometime over the summer, and by someone, I think it may have been Sarah, we came up with the computer record of that 2009 census. I had the printed copy, but I didn't have the computer. It was an Excel file, so it was a good starting point for us to continue with the current survey. We had somewhat grand intentions as we started off on this. We were thinking maybe we could build on top of a borough's ArcSys program so that we could geolocate all the trees, and we're also thinking that we would take a picture of each tree and so forth. In the end, we settled for some more modest but also more practical intentions. So Susan and I went out this past August, September, October, and walked all the sidewalks of the borough. I assigned Susan the south sides and me the north side, so she had to walk about 3 times as far as I did. But then I took responsibility for getting it all into an Excel file, and that's what we would like to present to you tonight. Matt, do you have extra copies? Chad Allen, did you get a copy? So what is distributed and also what is on the display there are the current trees in Gettysburg, the 2024 census. Also in an Excel file that I gave to Charles is the 2009 census, and there's a master sheet that has all the information we collected and has both of those censuses in place. But to have something presentable without too much information, this is just the 2024 file. There's 9 pages of that. There's a 10th page that we'll get to, which compares the number of trees and the variety of the trees that we had in 2009 versus 2024. And then the last page that I passed out was an inventory of the trees on West Broadway where I live. And I passed that because it kind of shows, unfortunately, it kind of shows the diminishment of the street trees that's happened over those 15 years. Susan and I walked the trees. I think any tree sense is necessarily a work in progress because the trees are changing and so forth, and we will try to keep updating. There also, I will acknowledge that there are some mistakes. Didn't get to all the trees until sort of October when some of the leaves were off, so I'll be back there in May and June, double checking some of the things I guessed at. And I think there were some transcription errors as well. Now, if you happen to be carrying a copy of this and you're walking down the street and you see that, hey, that tree is supposed to be a hornbeam, but clearly it's a hop hornbeam, if you will alert me to that, I'll make the appropriate change. Anyway, so this is our tree census as of the past couple months. Turn to the 10th page, and you'll see the difference in the counts by species that we have in town. And the big number is the bottom number, where as in 2009, we counted 850 street trees. Susan and I counted 488 in this last census. part of that difference is that we decided that 51 of the trees on Long Lane and that were counted in 2009 didn't really qualify as street trees under our current understanding. So we removed that. So the more pertinent number might be 808 versus 488. So that's a pretty big difference. The biggest explanation of that difference is the fact that the pear trees all died. We had lots of different types of Callery pears. We had Bradford pears. We had Capitol pears. Lots of different pears, but they all, the great majority of them died. The borough was not alone in being in Pennsylvania or the country in having an undue fascination with ornamental pear trees. And understandably, they were beautiful trees. You have avenues and streets that all turn white. And the foliage for the pears is, I think, very beautiful too. It's nice, vibrant green during the summer. But they were all susceptible to disease, which pretty much wiped them out 2011 starting then. First thing that I did when I came on the tree commission was decide what 17 trees were going to be replacing the 17 trees on York Street, 17 pear trees on York Street that had recently been cut down. So the pear, one of the ordinances, one of the provisions of the borough's ordinance is not more than 5% of any of the trees in the borough can be any species, and that diversity is important to prevent the kind of situation that we had with the Bradford pears. Unfortunately, it's not only the Bradford pears. We're having problems with our oaks, and that you'll see on the 11th page what Broadway looks like. Broadway used to be lined with pin oaks. Pin oaks are a beautiful tree that grow very straight. They make a majestic boulevard, and it's, an oak tree is a magnificent tree. It's nice to be able to line your streets with oaks, and the pin oak is certainly the best street tree among the oaks. But oak decline has been a problem in our area. It's been ascribed to various causes. Certainly the droughts that we've had in recent years contribute to oak decline. Most recently, there's a disturbing new blight which is happening to the oaks called bacterial leaf scorch. That's recent enough that it doesn't really fit as the cause for the pin oaks that we've lost, but it's an additional threat to the oaks. We lost a bunch of our ashes. You can see 2009, 34 ashes, 2024, 9 ashes. That was the emerald ash borer was the cause that attacked that. What else have we suffered? So lots of things have gone wrong with the trees. There have also been some factors that have reduced the opportunity to plant street trees. For instance, the college takes good care of their trees, and we don't really include the college's property in this, and in part because whenever the college goes in and fixes a sidewalk, they mostly eliminate the planting strip. So the sidewalk you'll see will be a 5-foot wide sidewalk that goes all the way to the curb. It doesn't offer an opportunity any longer for street trees, and that's happened elsewhere as well. So lots of changes in the borough and so forth. People aren't enthusiastic about planting trees either, and there's a sense that they mess up your sidewalk, and it's absolutely true. Susan and I can attest that as we walked the borough, most of the damage that we saw was from the trees. Recently, Robbie's been doing a new technique where we try to contain the roots better. We put a root barrier around the tree. We are choosing trees more carefully that will be less likely to raise the sidewalk. One of the trees that you see in the 2009 census is a Norway maple. Well, that's about the worst tree you could plant in terms of shallow root system that raises the sidewalk and is going to crack it. So we've learned some lessons, some of them painful, but we are trying to do better. And, you know, I think we will. But we are waiting actually to see, to some extent, to what extent this bacterial leaf scorch will affect different varieties and different species, and that will affect which trees we think are safe to plant going forward. I highlighted, on the count by species, I highlighted in red some of the trees that we have been planting more of recently. We planted a lot of zelkovas. They seem to be pretty hardy in our street environment. If you don't know exactly what a zelkova looks like, they're all over town. They were touted as being the replacement for the oak. I mean, not the oaks, the elms that all died out because of Dutch elm disease. Now, the elms were majestic trees, and it was such a shame to lose them. And but they're a vase-like tree, and that's a very nice shape for a street tree. And that vase gets handsomer as it gets old and some of the branches die. The zelkova is the same branching effect, although it's a much more branchy tree, so you don't quite come up with the elegance of an elm. But it is a good street tree. We have planted a number of Japanese lilac trees. You may notice they bloom during early June, and that's a very nice tree. There was some suggestion that perhaps it might be invasive tree that could escape the borough. As you're all aware, the Bradford pears have done. You go out around the town, and you see some woods on the highways, and boy, the Bradford pears have really gotten into some of our woods, and I think they can legitimately be regarded as a invasive tree of some concern. But we didn't, after studying it a little bit, we decided the Japanese lilac tree did not present a significant threat. The other thing that Susan and I did as we walked the streets was to take the opportunity to map the sidewalks of the disease caused by the sidewalk problems caused by the current trees, but also where possible we looked back to the 2009 trees that were no longer present and tried to note that as well. And we divided damage into 3 categories, either okay, there wasn't really any problem with it, or a disturbance that was more than 3/4 of an inch and less than 1.5 inches. Now, ADA, I think, says 1/4 inch, but being realistic, we thought 3/4 of an inch would be kind of the threshold for feeling like we had to do something. So we divided it to 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, and then more than 1.5 inches. The thought and perhaps the hope, and we'll see whether that's the case, that the ones that are 3/4 to 1/2 inch might be addressed by shaving. I get a big, powerful concrete grinder and grind it down. But clearly, anything more than 1.5 inches was going to have to be replaced. The concrete was going to have to be dealt with. Now, on the first page of the thing, you'll see those classifications, and there is a typo there. That the middle one should be 7.5 to 1.5, 0.75 to 1.5. The last column should be greater than 1.5, and that's corrected down below. But what I would draw your attention to is the counts for each column, because those numbers are a little bit better than I certainly would have expected prior to going out and actually mapping the town. Yeah. So of the trees, of the situations that we mapped, 581 by our judgment were okay, that they didn't really present a problem to foot traffic at this time. 45 were in the moderate base, and 40 were in the severe base. So that to me was an encouraging number, because I think that the 0.75 to 1.5 we're hoping can be addressed by shaving. The 40 that are greater than an inch and a half clearly will not be. They'll have to have concrete replacements. We wanted to get these numbers for the Borough Council's consideration. We have also undertaken a bit of a pilot project. Last year, when we gave our budget request to the council, we requested that some part of that $5,000 of our $20,000 be allocated for give us a little pilot project for working on concrete solutions, sidewalk solutions this year. I don't have that in the record. If you go back and look for that, I don't know that there's specific reference to that. That was a request that I made, and I understood at the time that it had been approved. But we still have money left in our budget for this year, and we have undertaken to use some of that $2,000 to do a sidewalk project. Robbie, anything happening with that so far in terms of getting together with?
Nothing's been scheduled yet.
So what we're going to do, I asked Conewago Construction, with whom I have worked a fair amount at the plant, a great company in my estimation, to give us a quote on how much it costs to shave sidewalks and how much it costs to replace slabs and so forth, so that, again, the council would have an idea of what you might be looking at. And he came back with a quote, as I had requested that he do so, by how much, but by mobilizing his crew for a day, it was $2,100 for a day's work. And we didn't know how many days it would take, so we asked him to do just one day's work and see how many sidewalks that could address. And we, working with Robbie and so forth, we're going to try to do that before the end of the year when our funds run out on Baltimore Street. Now, why Baltimore Street? Because it's the worst. It's the worst sidewalks. It's the highest traffic. But of course, it's also the ones that are supposed to be replaced in the future. And that's good and bad. Why spend your money on something that's going to be improved? But it's not, we don't think it's going to be improved in the very near future. And we don't know exactly when it's going to be improved. And in the meantime, it's a very bad stretch of sidewalk. And when they do improve it, if our fixes don't work real well, then they'll fix them. So we hope that will be useful to the Borough Council in terms of estimating what their costs might be. But I encourage them to follow the logic Mr. Moon was suggesting, and having the borough take responsibility for the sidewalks, because the street trees really are the main reason, not the only reason, but the main reason for why the sidewalks are in the condition they are. One of the frustrations for us on the Tree Council is that we consider our mandate to authorize us to spend $3,000 to take down a tree, but we've never really had a precedent for spending $500 to fix the sidewalk, so we don't have to spend $3,000 to take down a really nice tree. So I think a coordinated effort by the borough would make it more affordable than have individual property owners come in and have it shaved. And so I applaud the intention to go forward with that. Something else, since I think I might have a little extra time, is to alert the council to requests that we'll be making of you. There are a lot of places in Gettysburg where we would like to see more trees, but you have like a 2.5-foot wide planting strip. And it's a tough situation. And some of those will be a 2.5-foot planting strip, or 2 foot, and then a 2 or 3 foot sidewalk, and then a nice yard, which seems like a much better opportunity to add a tree. So the Street Tree Commission came up with the idea, well, perhaps with the council's permission, the borough, the tree commission could offer to plant trees on what is not really our right-of-way or anything, but would provide some of the same benefits. We would plant the tree at the borough and the tree commission's cost out of our budget, but we would not remain responsible for the tree, that we'd hand that over. This was an idea we just talked about at our last meeting, and the commission thought it was a pretty good idea. We haven't, Susan has prepared a nice draft to present to the council, which if I might, I'll just quickly read. The commission is seeking the consent of the council to implement a pilot project in 2025 to purchase and plant trees on private property where the sidewalk area is not suitable for trees. The council has given the Shade Tree Commission the responsibility and authority to plant, maintain, and remove trees in public spaces in the borough. Public spaces include the right-of-way along streets and highways where sidewalks are open to the public. These public spaces benefit greatly from a tree canopy that provides shade, cooling, pollutant removal, and a welcoming atmosphere. Street trees in our higher density downtown invite people to walk and enjoy our shops, our restaurants, and our history. The commission faces many challenges in planting and maintaining street trees along our public sidewalks. Urban settings are often not conducive to the long-term health of trees. Other challenges include grass strips that are too narrow for planting, sidewalks too narrow for tree wells, utilities located under and above sidewalks, challenging climate conditions, and fear of future sidewalk damage. An example can be seen on the eastern end of York Street, where those entering the borough form a first impression. There are no overhead utilities on the north side, but the sidewalk is too narrow to accommodate trees. It is an uninviting streetscape, not conducive to pedestrian activity. Under the proposed pilot project, trees would be made available to consenting property owners and would be planted in front yard space in the area located from 5 to 15 feet from the property side of the sidewalk. The commission is proposing to use $5,000 from our shade tree budget that you've already put in the provisional budget for next year to cover the costs associated with purchase and planting. The property owner would be responsible for any future maintenance on removal of the tree. We believe the trees planted during the pilot project will do better and live longer in these yard locations while still providing the same benefit to the community. If there is interest and support from property owners and the trees do well, we can consider this for future years as we work to increase the size and health of the borough's tree canopy. The Commission hopes the Council will look favorably on this proposal. I welcome any suggestions from the Council members or borough staff and am available to answer your questions or concerns. Now, this was actually just a draft, but with this opportunity tonight, I thought I would go ahead and alert the council that it was coming. So that's an idea that we throw out, and we will be presenting officially to the council if the other members of the Tree Commission approve this draft at our next meeting, which is in February. I think that's about concludes my remarks. Susan is here as well because she's expert at all the trees on the south side of town, and we would welcome any questions from any of the audience or anyone in regards to our work. We hope it will prove to be helpful to the borough.
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you for this, both of you. This is quite an undertaking, and for those of you not picking up on this, this was a volunteer initiative that these two took for us. It is thorough, it is comprehensive, it is extraordinarily helpful. The idea that we just need to kind of go address by address here to find these 40 locations that are in the worst shape and make an assessment now as to what the repairs could turn into in a capital project for the borough is extraordinarily helpful. Does anybody have any questions for David or Susan?
Matt, if I might, I would just add that as I have visited other communities, my son lives out in Seattle, and I visited him several times. Seattle is a wonderful place to grow trees. It's what it was just really nice. They have trees all over the place, but they also have sidewalks that are close to the trees, and where the trees have impacted those sidewalks, they do a lot with shaving, but also with ramping with mortar. Now, the expectation is that a mortar like that's usually not going to last very long, but in the meantime, it helps. And it seems like they do that, and so that's another avenue that the borough could look at. But they do it sometimes with mortar, sometimes with asphalt, and they pay attention to the safety of their sidewalks, and at the same time, they've got a beautiful tree canopy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely true. So there is a question here as to whether we want the Shade Tree Commission to pursue a new facet of their mission here, and that is to exploit areas of the right-of-way that currently we wouldn't touch, which would be people's yards on the other side of the sidewalk. That right-of-way in most residential neighborhoods is going to extend about 10 feet from the curb line, so even beyond the sidewalk, there is space. We can opt to work with property owners. Mature trees are a benefit to your property value. They're a benefit to your heating and cooling if you're, able to put it so that your home is shaded. There might be lots of people who would be willing to work with the Shade Tree Commission in that capacity. So would anybody here have any strong reservations about the Shade Tree Commission reallocating some of its funds for a new program to reach out to homeowners and see if, moving beyond the planting strips was viable?
No, thank you for what you're doing. I don't have any reservations at all. In fact, I think the pilot project is a wonderful idea, stimulate some interest in planting some trees and giving some homeowners
Thank you.
some much-needed shade.
I thank the Shade Tree Commission and all the volunteer work that you put into this. My only reservation is that it is, to my knowledge, the only authority board and commission that does not report a recommendation to council to vote on. And it does indeed use borough budgeted tax. So I would like for that procedure to be considered. Not that I don't appreciate the volunteer work, I do, of all of our ABCs. But I don't know any of the other ABCs that do anything without, especially when it's utilizing staff and borough funds. I don't know that they do anything without coming to
The HRC
us.
operates similarly.
The HRC isn't utilizing, are they utilizing borough funds
Yes.
for their training?
Yeah, civil service
Once a year.
advises council, not the other way around.
I just think for the extent that the Shade Tree Commission is transforming the aesthetic and the look of the borough, and we've got issues with the sidewalks, and I appreciate the idea of the pilot program. I think that's a great idea. But I would just voice again, I really think that the Shade Tree Commission needs to make recommendations to the council to approve, just like, for example, Historic Architecture Review Board.
Okay, but you wouldn't have an issue with them looking into,
Absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
okay, cool, thank you. Mrs. Butterfield?
Oh, I think it's a good idea. Bring the community members, the homeowners into it. Participation that would be great.
It's an unknown how much response it would get. We would have to go out and solicit people to come to us.
Sure.
I don't think we would go out and knock on people's doors and say, can we plant a tree in your front yard? So we would solicit people to come. So how much interest it'll provoke, we don't know, but I think it's worth a try.
Learning situation, Ron.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounds like a good idea. as long as these are consenting private property owners.
Right.
Then, yeah, you still have to bear the burden of, cleaning up after the tree and taking care of it and anything that it might cause damage to in the future. So, yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
I recently observed 2 brand-new sidewalk cuts on Franklin Street. Are those for shade trees?
Those are for shade trees, I think. Susan, how many are we putting in there? 3?
I think 2 went in there, Franklin.
Yeah, that sounds right. Cool.
Now, that's a good case. At the council's urging, we have adopted our procedures and gone out and interacted more with the property owners. In that case, I took a letter to the store there that along Franklin Street, and I gave them the letter and said the borough would like to plant trees in this place, and if you have problems with that, please get back to us. Well, the people I presented it to were Spanish-speaking. I'm not sure if they fully understood what I was asking, but I did have them the written brief. We didn't get any response back. Silence signifies consent, except sometimes it really doesn't. So sometimes we're just kind of that. But we did follow that procedure, and in the case of Buford Avenue, we got turned down. In the case of the Federal Point Inn, we worked with them to get some nice crepe myrtles being planted. So we have taken heed of what the borough has wanted us to do and interact with the public more proactively.
Appreciate that. All right, any further questions?
If I could just add.
Please,
something here.
please.
We, as you're working on your sidewalk ordinance, I think it's important that we kind of dovetail with that. So if we could, maybe be part of those updates to that ordinance, that would be helpful to us in terms of sidewalk space for trees. But I do think in conjunction with what you're doing, we also probably should look at our shade tree ordinance as well. It's confusing. It doesn't exactly fit with the state regulations, so we need to take a look at that. The permit is out of date and probably needs to be looked at and improved. And we have already started to work on our shade tree list. We still have pear trees on our shade tree
yeah.
list in the ordinance. So we would like to take that out, make that a resolution, the list of trees. So we've been working on that, and we'll continue to work on that and have that ready. So, and I will tell you my own personal experience. I have had a tree that had a sidewalk raised about like that. And I made the decision to keep the tree even though it wasn't in great shape. I may regret that, but I had the contractor actually ramp the sidewalk slightly up over the tree. And that worked pretty well so far. I only did that last year, but it is expensive. It cost me $3,300 because when you ramp a sidewalk, it's a longer span that you have to replace. So you have to think about that. But there are also communities, when we look at the shade tree ordinance, we will look at other communities and get their ordinances. Some communities actually have their own arborist, which would be helpful to us to get an ordinance to look at that reflects, an arborist that's helping that community. Places like Allentown have a beautiful entryway with huge London planes, which are a type of sycamore tree. And the sidewalks are very fine, they're perfect. So I think we can learn a lot from other communities too as we work on that. So I wish you luck with the sidewalk ordinance. Keep us in the loop so that we can, use that and make sure that our shade tree ordinance will be back to you with some recommendations on that. So
Yeah, that would be very helpful if you folks had some formalized recommendations. As we get into January, we'll be looking to set our legislative priorities for 2025. Something tells me we're going to spend a little bit of time on zoning, but there might be other stuff we get to work on too.
Right.
this entire sidewalk overhaul is probably going to take us several years, and this is a massive component of it. So
Yeah.
if you had some formal recommendations, we would gladly receive those.
Okay, great. We'll do that.
Thank you both.
If I may interject, I have a question. This is an interesting idea of municipality planting trees outside of the right-of-way. One, are you aware of any other municipalities that do that? And two, my spidey senses go up about indemnification. Say, said tree planted by the borough suddenly gets a gust of wind and a branch falls down and hits somebody. In our litigious society we've created for ourselves, it's just something I think we should investigate.
It would no doubt be helpful to have Borough's Council consider that.
Yeah.
I think we would probably want to come up with a document for the property owner to sign saying, thank you very much for planting this tree. I recognize that it is my responsibility going forward.
Much like a sidewalk.
Right.
Yeah.
Although there's no formal agreements with sidewalk.
We just got to wing it. All right. Thank you both very much for that. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? We don't have to talk it all out tonight, but we can let that percolate. It's something we are going to be revisiting here in the near future, but if you have a thought you'd like to share tonight, please do. Okay. Sidewalk clutter / A-frame signs. So this is something we have discussed at some length, going back at least as long as I've been on council. There have been voices in the past who, including my own, who have said that sidewalk signage can often create impediments as opposed to simply information. We did sort of touch on this very recently in the sign ordinance revisions. It doesn't give us too much guidance here other than that portable signs located on or near a public sidewalk or similar pedestrian walkway shall allow a minimum width of 5 feet of unobstructed area between the sign and any other object which could impede pedestrian traffic. The savvy observer will note that that 5 feet figure is coming to us directly from the Americans with Disabilities Act. Unfortunately, as we have seen the proliferation of items onto our sidewalks, that includes furniture, merchandise, sandwich board signs, often placed by, a well-intending employee who doesn't, go out there with a 5-foot radius measure. We often find that these things are actually creating obstructions. We are still in the process, with our solicitor's help here, of coming up with a code enforcement citation ordinance to give us the better ability to address these obstructions in an administrative capacity. But we do often see that these things sort of go unregulated and unenforced. I can think of one sandwich board sign I experience on my walk to work every day that is in the absolute dead center of the sidewalk, and there is not 5 feet on any side of it. I'm also sensitive to the fact that this particular vendor faces a lot of challenges in terms of visibility from the street, so they need every little bit of help they can get. However, where they are placing the sign is already in violation of our existing sign ordinance. So we need to kind of figure out as we move forward, and again, these are these overlapping circles of sidewalks, code enforcement, the sign ordinance, and now, furniture or whatever. How do we create both a permission structure as well as a enforcement structure to make sure that at the very minimum our sidewalks are passable? That is their sole reason for existence, is for people to be able to move freely, and the other things we do with those are bonuses. If we can fit a chair and table, great, but if we can't then fit a pedestrian, then the chair is not great. So, discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I'll start. It's really difficult because it's almost like how can we do something just across the board? Because so many of our sidewalks, as we know, are much smaller than others. And really, it's so address specific. And so that it's difficult outside of the ADA to create something just across the board. It's almost like we have to go through, similar to what the Shade Tree Commission is doing. We almost have to go through and map it out. And if you're on this street, and then do we get into the legal issue of it? I don't know. That's a question for Harry.
Well, the tool we have implemented in the past is that there are dimensional standards, right? If your sidewalk isn't wide enough, then you don't get a sign. And that's just the way it is, right? If your sidewalk isn't wide enough, you don't get tables and chairs. Now, interestingly, we did try to do something a little novel several years ago where we were willing to permit the reallocation of parking spaces to create added sidewalk space for retail applications, for dining, for a variety of uses with the parklet program, and it was an abject failure, right? People did not have any interest in that. They will gladly fill the existing sidewalk in front of their business, but they wouldn't pay to, maintain the passability of that sidewalk. So dimensional standards are one tool. I think one of the problems we face, though, is that we can establish the dimensional standards, but unless we are empowered to do that daily code enforcement and citation, and citation is the last resort, right? Conversation is always the first resort for our code enforcement department. It takes vigilance, on the part of the vendors as well as the borough to make sure that that passability remains intact. Aside from dimensional standards and code enforcement, I think you're right. Like, what are the tools we can employ here?
So if I may interject, we do have a template for this in that we do have the outdoor dining ordinance where a vendor or a business would apply to the borough for the opportunity to use some public right-of-way space for their economic gain. I think the argument could be made that this is an extension of that. So if you want to put out just chairs, for example, would you need permission from the borough to do that because you're utilizing the public space in that regard?
Right, and something else to consider is as most of our sidewalks have tree wells, and that, depending upon where said tree well is, and depending upon if there is a stair unit to, for example, the front door or whatnot of said business or residence that is impeding, that it's already, that step unit is out on the sidewalk, which is the right of way, and then there's a tree well. So it's making that sidewalk just thinner and thinner to pass.
And that's part of the staff review of the application.
Right.
So a restaurant comes to the borough and says, I'd like to do outdoor dining. Our planning staff would go out with tape measures and
not just-
identify the
right.
geometric space that would work for
And not
that
just
business.
for outdoor dining. I mean, it's the whole conversation, I guess, that we're having right now is that sandwich board and that little tiny sidewalk area that also has a step unit to a front door and
Yeah.
also has a tree well and a planter garden. I mean, some of them are really difficult to navigate.
Well, and we did put dimensional standards on the signage itself in the sign ordinance, and this was, numbers that were arrived at in cooperation with representatives of the business community. You can have a 12 square foot sandwich board sign. It can be 4 foot by 3 foot. And, we're talking about sidewalks that are 8 feet wide, but 3 feet of that can be taken up by sign. So that means there's really only one place it can be, that you can still have 5 feet of passability. And then when you take into account too, parking spaces and somebody's ability to get in and out of a car, like the number of places it can go starts to drop precipitously. The ideal location for many of these things would be essentially abutting the building that they are advertising, but that's not always practical or practicable for the business.
I know that when we were working on the ordinance, we made these guidelines like more stringent, because I think they were 3 feet before, and we went to the ADA regulations of 5 feet.
Yeah.
So I guess is the question, how do we enforce this? Is that what, are you saying that the code enforcement officer can't enforce what we've written into legislation?
He can enforce it. What we're working on currently is an ordinance that would actually empower citation. A repeat offender who's, can't seem to teach their staff where to put this thing day after day after day, who creates the impediment, could face a citation. Most people, you might have to talk to them a couple times a year and be like, oh yeah, sorry. I'm thinking of one particular restaurant where the seating tends to kind of creep throughout the season, and they periodically just need to be reminded to kind of scooch it back a little bit. That's reasonable, right? That doesn't need a citation, that needs a conversation. But there can be repeat offenders where, a citation would be appropriate. We do have a section in the sign ordinance that talks about, very precise measurements of how much space has to be allowable. It limits the number of portable signs per business, not per building, mind you, but per business located at a single property. So we do have regulations in place. I guess the question here is, would anybody want to see more stringent regulation here as it pertains to passability of sidewalks, or do we simply wait for enforcement and citation to come more fully online and just work with what we have and see if there's more room for maneuvering and massaging there?
I agree with what Chad was saying about having some sort of scope or idea of the situation, like what could be happening or what is happening. And not every business is the same. Some businesses have, as you said, a lot more sidewalk space, so they do have room, and others may not have enough. And it would be great to see that assessment first, I think. And secondly, just looking at the sidewalk ordinance, my question is, why is there a separate A-frame sign specifically like lumped with sidewalk clutter as opposed to outdoor furniture? Because to me, if they're impediments, according to ADA, an impediment's an impediment, no matter if it's a sign or if it's a chair or
That's right.
if it's a standing, I don't know, something else standing out there in the way. And I don't think if I were certainly somebody who were trying to trespass through a sidewalk, that impediment, it wouldn't matter what that impediment is. So I would like to see it, I would like to see the language cleaned up a little bit, just so it's very clear what's permitted and what's not permitted, and it's not really lumped into separate, like outdoor furniture, and is seemed to be, a positive thing, while sidewalk clutter and A-frame signs seem to be a negative thing. I don't know. That's just me trying to make sense of it because I'm new, fairly new to this conversation. But so yeah, if we could do anything, it would be to clarify for the businesses, especially, what is permitted and not permitted, and then how much space is allowed. And of course, with each business having different sidewalk space, the contingencies would be very clearly spelled out in the ordinance.
I agree with you that we need to do a better job of defining what outdoor furniture is, or the types of things that would be allowed. I'm thinking there's several places that I walk past where they have copious amount of potter plants, for example. They look great, but they tend to be proliferating. And so at what point does that become an impediment? I don't think it is right now, but they continue to show up. So at what point does that, yeah, so I think to your point, I think we do need to define the space a little bit better. I don't know what form that looks like, but.
It's the same thing with the, flags that we put in there as well, to the height. Because when you're walking down the streets, you can just be hit by these flags the whole way down the street. And so I think our hope was that that would be a code enforcement correction as well. But I don't know how in favor I am of, if we map all this out and then we start hitting small businesses with citations, like it is, they're not big box stores.
Right.
So every cent counts.
Oh, sure. But that's true for homeowners as well. And I think we've seen that our in-house code enforcement has done an extraordinary job of, first, informing somebody of the issue, then working with them in a very forgiving manner to say, this is what needs corrected. Citation is always the last resort. These are our neighbors. We're not looking to, to jam people up. We just kind of want to improve the situations that are being problematic. The flags is a great example, right? We just recently used our ordinance to become consistent with the existing state law, which says flags have to be 7 feet off the ground. So now our ordinance agrees with that, but I haven't seen any flags move, right? So, at some point, we're going to have to go and say, sorry, the flag's got to go up 1.5 feet or whatever it is. And that's not going to be positive or popular. But right now, they're essentially all in violation of state law. It's a great example of where, we want to have better compliance, but we don't want to be, jerks.
On that, just out of curiosity, if you or Harry knows, 7 feet from the ground, that's where the end of the pole is, or that's where the end of the flag is?
That's where the flag is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really think that our guidelines are fine currently. I don't know that we need to be more stringent on them as long as we are meeting ADA requirements for sure. That is end stop period. There's no discussion about that. But I do think that we need to, with code enforcement, have them do even more. Perhaps they are already. And if they're being ignored, then that's an issue. And that's when I feel like, no, you need a citation. If you're being ignored, you're not fixing it. I get it, conversations a couple of times, maybe 3. But for sure, I think our guidelines are there. I just don't know. I'm gonna play devil's advocate and give them the benefit of the doubt. Do they really know that this is where it needs to be? That flag needs to be here. That sign really can't be in the middle of the sidewalk because your sidewalk width is only this, and it's impossible to pass ADA requirement on either side of it.
Yeah.
So I think if they, again, get a little bit more from code enforcement on that education of that, because as they say, ignorance is not a bad word. Ignorance just means you just didn't know.
So to be fair to staff, at the beginning of this year, he did begin enforcement on certain sidewalk issues. And we were like, whoa, hold up. We're not quite ready for that yet.
Gotcha.
Right? I think he's waiting on very specifically, are we going to be making revisions to our, what we require of homeowners and property owners and business owners? And 2, are we going to finalize the, citation mechanism? So I don't think it's that he has not been willing to do the enforcement. I think it's just a question for him of what is appropriate at this moment. not wanting to overstep, not wanting to, step on council's toes, should we, give one person a citation and then change the rules so
Gotcha.
that that citation wouldn't have existed? Like, for example, on a buckled sidewalk from a street tree. Maybe it's just we have him walk around with a 5-foot hula hoop on downtown periodically, and if he hits anything, well, there's an issue, right? I mean, it's a hysterical picture in your head, but it's also, a practical measurement tool, so. All right, any other thoughts on these issues? I think it's pretty clear we still have some work to do on this as we get into the new year. Every little decision we make has ripple effects that affect somebody good and somebody bad, so we need to be thoughtful with these things.
Yeah, like I said, I think our guidelines are fine as is, unless I'm missing something. But I think that there was a time during the heavy part of the pandemic that we were very loose on a lot of things, and that's understandable. We are now nearing 5 years from it, and times they are changing, as Dylan said. And I think that it's we need to rein things in back to what our guidelines are. For sure, ADA compliance is very important for our town. And I think that it's time to make sure that we allow our staff to do what they need to do for our code enforcement. And again, I think it's just educating some of like, you do know that you can't put that there anymore. Or maybe this shouldn't be on the sidewalk at all. And I think it's just making sure that they're aware of that and why. It's very easy. It takes very little time for a habit to start. And I think we were a little loose on some things during 2020 and 21 as far as helping our businesses thrive and survive. And the time is now to rein things back to how our town should look. If that makes sense.
It does. Alicia, you mentioned, that what is the difference between, one type of clutter and another. I just wanted to point out that, the outdoor dining stuff, that is regulated by a separate ordinance. And also, Robbie, whenever a business decides to take advantage of the outdoor dining, he actually shoots pins into the sidewalk that show you the boundaries of where you can actually have that furniture. And that's unfortunately not something we're going to be necessarily able to do with the signage or, a bench. So there is a challenge there.
Yeah, sorry to keep butting in, but yeah, that, for example, that A-frame sign, that sandwich board sign, as I said earlier, it's not just across the board on the borough. I really think we really have to look at it per address, or at least per block of, no, our sidewalk is just this wide. But even within that one block, there's the steps and there's the tree wells, and it kind of, depending upon where your building is, it makes it different. So
That's right.
It's almost like we have to, if we can legally, make a recommendation or suggestion to said business of, due to ADA, et cetera, your sign needs to go here in this specific spot.
Right.
Not just loosey-goosey put it wherever, whatever employee happens to be working that day, because it is causing issues. I have an A-frame sign from my business. I don't think it brings in anything. I know for other businesses it does. It is vital for other businesses. I personally don't like them. I think they get in the way too much, depending upon what sidewalk it's on. But I do appreciate and understand a lot of small businesses are quite different from mine, and they survive on that, or they really need that A-frame sign for their publicity for their business. But I just think that we really need to identify where it needs to be, and sometimes it just really depends on what location you're at.
Yeah.
Because not all of our sidewalks are the same. There are some that are just lovely and lots of space, and some that are not.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, with the dimensional standard, with that 5-foot, minimum radius, you can look at the first block of Chambersburg Street. The north side, signs are just really not feasible for most of those businesses. On the south side, you have way more latitude. And it's just the way the street is built. Those are excellent observations. Anybody else want to throw anything in here?
I would like to just add something to put historical perspective on this. Susan will remember that the present document was crafted in the midst of a fervent movement about wheelchairs, both within businesses and the buildings around and on sidewalks. And what I hear tonight, the discussion has also included just pedestrian traffic in that. And I think that's a good thing, where this will not just be wheelchair-driven, it will be passageway driven, and that's good, I think.
Well, there's a philosophical shift that has happened since 1990, and we can just start talking about people who use a wheelchair as a pedestrian, right? They're not exceptional if our sidewalks are accessible to them.
And it's also, the baby strollers are not getting smaller, friends. They're getting larger. And it can be difficult to, walk your dogs, especially if you have more than one and you're walking them at the same time, and a baby stroller and dining furniture and whatever else is out there, and then a sandwich board sign. But if I could take a quote, I'm going to mess up the quote, but I'm going to mess it up. But our good friend Jill Sellers in Main Street, it's a good problem to have, to talk about how many people are coming to town, that we need to make sure that we can all navigate, not just the local residents, but we need to make sure, it's a good problem that we're having this conversation, that we've got so many people coming that want to be here, live here, work here, play here, visit here, and we need to make sure it's easily accessible for everybody.
Yep, 100%. Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to ask members to keep all these topics in mind as we move into the new year. We will revisit all of this. We are far from done talking about this subject. We have some big pieces that have to fall into place before the little pieces will get cleaned up, but it's important that we have these conversations about all of these different aspects, and Charles's illustration of a peony there. Yep. All right, we don't have any new business to discuss this night, so this is going to take us back to public comment. The second section is not restricted to items that appear on the agenda. We do ask that you use the podium. Please limit yourself to 5 minutes, and do please state your name and address of residence.
David Rice again, 145 West Broadway. I would just, Marty Jolin is a little more conversant with the sidewalk and ADA requirements than the rest of us are on the tree commission. And he has advised us in the past that the regulation calls for 5 feet, but it allows exceptions for narrower spaces if they are not too long. And so I don't know to what extent that applies to the signs and so forth, but we've been told that applies to the trees.
That's correct, thank you. Any other public comment? All right, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.